When Nashville's youngest tech CEO lost her purse in the back of an Uber, she thought it was a disaster. What she didn't expect was the driver who returned it, a man who would shatter her engagement, risk her billion-dollar empire, and steal her heart with a single kiss. But when love collides with power, someone always pays the price.
The doors of the Pinnacle Tower sighed open, and Vivienne Clarke walked out like a promise kept. Nashville's morning light flashed along the marble floor as her crimson heels clicked a steady metronome. She was 28, soft in all the right places and powerful everywhere else. Hips filling a cream wrap dress, shoulders squared beneath a blazer that meant business. People stared because she was hard to ignore. Platinum hair in a sleek twist, mouth painted the color of fresh berries. Confidence poured into curves that took up space without apology. Board at noon, Goldman at 3, Vogue wants confirmation by 5, said her assistant, Cam, and Mason's team needs your engagement statement. Tell Vogue yes, Vivienne said, stepping into the elevator. Tell Goldman we're on track. Tell Mason I'll send language tonight. She tucked her leather purse tight beneath her arm, aware of its weight. Phone, fobs, 3 black cards, and the only hard copy of a confidential pitch deck. It was the kind of day that made her feel bulletproof. She had built Clarke Technologies from a desk in a studio apartment, turned it into the city's shiniest AI rocket, and learned how to keep a room quiet with a single raised eyebrow. People called her calculating. She called it clarity. By midnight, the rooftop party was fading behind her like a sunset fable. Champagne had taken the edge off, adrenaline had done the rest. She slid into the back of an Uber, sleek sedan, cedar-clean interior, a soft jazz station humming, and texted Cam a final instruction. Prep revised slide 12 for Goldman. The driver's eyes met hers briefly in the mirror. Warm, steady, unreadable. "Vivienne?" he asked, checking the app. I nodded. "Home in Belmead, please." The city glided by in reflections. Bridges, neon, the curved shoulder of the river. She let her head tilt against the seat, a hand curled around the purse in her lap, then jerked awake when the car rolled to a stop at her gate. "Thank you," she murmured, tipping more than the fare. She drifted through her front door on sore feet, kicked off her heels with a sigh, and fell into the cool cradle of linen sheets. Morning greeted her with a cruel fact. The purse was gone. She checked the foyer table, the couch, under the car seat, the hallway bench. Nothing. Her pulse climbed fast. No purse meant no phone, no cards, no fobs, and worst, the pitch deck. If those projections leaked before Goldman, competitors would feast. "Calm," she said into the kitchen speaker. "Lock my cards, ping Uber, track my phone now." "I'm on it," came the tinny reply. Phone last pinged downtown at 6:07 a.m. She swore. Panic wasn't her style, but the edges of it bit at her. She paced the kitchen, palms braced on the island, the world briefly narrowed to one horrible possibility. She had built a company that predicted risk in other people's data and failed to foresee her own. At 6:29, a text arrived from an unknown number. "Darius Holt. Miss Clarke, I think I have your purse. Found it in my back seat after my shift. Everything's there. I can bring it to you." Her breath stalled. The attached photo showed her purse beside a chipped mug and a hand, large, brown, steady, keeping the bag in frame without touching it. "Vivienne, where are you?" "Darius, Edge Hill. I can meet at the Broadview Cafe at 7:15. Public place, safer for both of us." There it was. Caution, courtesy, a little humor. She put on a black wrap dress that hugged her like a second thought, slipped into low heels, and left without makeup. Power armor could wait. She needed speed. The Broadview Cafe was half awake, baristas yawning, grinders singing. He stood near the window, tall and broad, wearing a charcoal tee and clean jeans. Darius. The morning wrapped around him like he belonged to it. When he saw her, he lifted a small wave, eyes a deep, warm brown that took everything in without flinching. "Miss Clarke," he said, voice soft like a bass line. He placed the purse on the table between them. "I didn't look through it, just checked for ID." Relief hit hard, her knees wobbled. She opened the purse, fingers quick. Cards, fobs, the pitch deck in its envelope, phone. All of it, intact. "You have no idea," she said, exhaling like she'd been holding her breath all night. "You just saved my company's week." "Glad it's back where it belongs," he smiled. "Not the kind that asked for anything. I was going to drop it at the nearest station if I couldn't reach you." "Why didn't you?" she asked. "Drop it, I mean." He paused. "It's your life in there. I figured you'd want it from a person, not a bin." Something tugged low in her chest. She had met heads of funds who didn't show this kind of care. Up close, he had the kind of face you wanted to trust. Clean jawline, a faint scar on his chin, eyes that watched like the world had taught him to watch. She caught herself cataloging details the way she did with investors. Calm, present, precise. "Let me pay you for your time," she said automatically, already pulling a card because this is how her world worked. Everything touched by money moved easier. He held up a hand. A small shake of his head. "Please don't. I'm just returning what's yours. You drove across town at dawn." He chuckled. It reached his eyes. "I was up anyway. Early drop-offs end by sunrise." "Darius," she said, tasting the name because she wanted to know it. "You're welcome, Miss Clarke." "Vivienne," she corrected, surprising herself. She didn't offer first names. Names to her were strategic levers. But he had already balanced the power by refusing her money. She didn't want to outmuscle him. She wanted to meet him. "Vivienne," he echoed, gentle.
They stood there a breath too long, the cafe's clatter dimming around them. The air felt charged, as if the city had leaned in to listen. "What do you do outside of Uber?" she asked, trying to file him into a box that would explain the quiet assurance in his posture. "Used to write code," he said. "Still do at night. These days I drive to keep the schedule flexible for my mom." He'd glanced toward the window, a small shift that told her the topic was both true and guarded. "She's recovering from a stroke." "I'm sorry," Vivienne said. "It came out raw. That's a lot." "Some days are loud," he said, a flicker of humor, "but we're figuring it out." The honesty of it sent heat to her throat. He wasn't performing, he wasn't angling, he was just being a person in a world that asked too much. She looked at him fully then, seeing not just the steadiness, but the gravity, how he made space feel safer by standing inside it. Something in her, the part that had been armored for years, softened so quickly it felt like falling. Her hand closed around the purse strap, their fingers brushed. The spark was immediate, bright as the first click of a breaker after a blackout. She inhaled. He didn't move. And before she could draft a pro-con list, or call a lawyer, or remember the press, she stepped closer and kissed him. It wasn't the practiced kiss people expected from a woman like her. It was simple and sure. Thank you and hello at once, her mouth finding his with the startled grace of someone who'd finally bumped into the truth. He didn't grab, didn't rush. He met her right where she was, warm and steady, the world narrowing to breath and heartbeat and the clean cedar of his shirt. When she pulled back, her cheeks were hot. She laughed once, shocked by herself, then heard the words leave her before she could cage them. "I fell for you at first sight." A line you couldn't unsay. A vow disguised as a rush of air. He blinked, stunned but not mocking, a smile rising slow. "That's a lot for a Tuesday."
It's a lot for any day, she admitted, recovering a sliver of humor and completely unadvised by legal counsel. They stood in the quiet wake of the moment. Somewhere a steamer hissed, street noise threaded through the glass. He shifted, thumbs hooking lightly into his belt as if to ground himself. "I'm not, trying to be part of your life," he said carefully. "I just wanted to do right." "I know," she said. That was the hook. He hadn't tried. And yet here she was, thinking about a man who would rather bring a purse to its owner than to a station, who got up at dawn for a mother healing slowly, who met chaos without flinching. "Can I—" She stopped, new to this particular kind of risk. "Can I buy you breakfast? No strings, no cameras, just a meal." He considered her, then nodded once. "I could eat." They chose a corner table. She ordered black coffee and a cinnamon roll the size of a fist. He asked for eggs and rye toast. They didn't talk about Goldman or Vogue or Mason. They talked about the way Nashville changed block by block, how gentrification made history both shiny and brittle, how the river looked at night from the Shelby Street Bridge. By the time the plates were cleared, the humidity had curled a few blonde wisps at her temple. She didn't smooth them. Darius noticed and didn't comment, which somehow felt like intimacy. "Thank you," she said again, at the door, fingers sliding along the purse strap. "For the bag, for breakfast, for not making this weird." He grinned. "It's already weird, but it's good." She stepped onto the sidewalk, the city brighter than it had been at 6. Behind her, he lifted a small salute and headed toward the lot. She watched him go, heart drumming a rhythm she hadn't heard since she was 20 and fearless. Cam texted, "Goldman reconfirmed. You okay?" Vivienne typed back, smiling at her reflection in the glass. "Better than okay. See you at 11. She pushed through the cafe door, purse secure, spine long. For years, she'd thought safety lived in control. Now she wondered if it lived in truth, and if truth had just walked away in worn boots and a charcoal tee, leaving her with a kiss that felt like a key. Vivienne Clarke had walked into countless boardrooms, but the cafe that morning rattled her more than Goldman Sachs ever could. The taste of Darius still lingered on her lips, and her own words, "I fell for you at first sight," echoed like a confession she couldn't take back. By the time her Tesla hummed back toward Belmead, her rational mind went to work like a well-trained army. "You're engaged. You're the face of a multi-million-dollar company. He's an Uber driver. You don't do impulsive." Yet, when she slipped into the sterile calm of her estate, the purse safely on the counter, she realized something dangerous. She didn't regret it. Not the kiss, not the breakfast, not the way she had laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. Her day should have devoured her. Zoom with Boston investors, review with the legal team, final rehearsals for Goldman's pitch. But every free breath was invaded by Darius. She kept catching herself staring at a reflection in the mirrored wall outside her office, wondering what he had seen when he looked at her. Not the CEO, not the carefully sculpted image, just Vivienne, tired but alive. By evening, Mason called. "Babe, Vogue cover just confirmed. They want the engagement angle. Dad's thrilled. This'll push Clarke Technologies into the right investor circles before the round." His voice was smooth, rehearsed, carrying that tone of ownership he never questioned. Vivienne pressed her phone to her ear and stared at the purse on the counter. The purse Darius had returned. "That's good. Good, it's phenomenal. We're a power couple. Titan meets Titan." She pictured Mason's tailored suits, his family's marble estate, his mother's calculating gaze. They looked perfect in photos, but felt hollow in private. Her chest ached with the contrast. Mason talking about Vogue, Darius talking about his mother's recovery. One spoke in headlines, the other in truths. The next night, Vivienne had a gala downtown, a benefit for Nashville's rising tech leaders, cameras everywhere, glitter pouring down the chandeliers. She wore a scarlet gown that hugged her curves, earning her the kind of stares she'd learned to weaponize. Mason escorted her, hand on her lower back like possession disguised as affection. "Smile, Viv," he whispered as photographers crowded. "Remember, this is legacy." She smiled, lips glossed to perfection, but her mind betrayed her. She wondered if Darius had ever been in this hotel lobby, waiting for a fare, watching these same people glide by without seeing him. When Mason drifted off to schmooze bankers, she stepped outside for air. The city's humidity wrapped her skin, neon lit her like stained glass. And then, there he was, Darius. Across the street, leaning against his sedan, scrolling through his phone between rides. The sight knocked her breathless. He wasn't dressed for the gala. He wasn't even aware she was there. He was just there. Real. She crossed without thinking, heels clicking like drum beats. Darius. His head lifted, and when his eyes found her in that scarlet dress, something flickered. Surprise, heat, restraint. "Vivienne," he said, voice lower in the night air. "Didn't think I'd see you again." "You found me," she said softly. "Twice now." He smiled at that, shaking his head. "This city's smaller than people think." Silence stretched, alive with the hum of passing cars and music spilling from the gala doors. She should have turned back inside, played her role, but instead she stepped closer, the night electric between them. "I keep thinking about breakfast, about you." "Careful," he said gently. "Words like that from someone like you, they don't always end well for someone like me." "Someone like you?" she asked, brow furrowing. "Driver, black man, living paycheck to paycheck." His eyes searched hers. "You're Vivienne Clarke." "And what does that mean?" she pressed, breath shallow. "It means your world doesn't touch mine, not really." She should have agreed, should have laughed it off, returned to her champagne tower. Instead, her hand reached, fingertips grazing his arm. Heat radiated from him, grounding her in a way money never had. "Then maybe my world needs to," she whispered. For a moment, he didn't move. The city blurred around them, neon reflections pooling on wet asphalt. Then he exhaled, slow, like surrender. "Get in," he said quietly, opening the passenger door. They drove with the windows cracked, Nashville breathing against their skin. She kicked off her heels, curls tumbling free from jeweled pins, and laughed when the wind tangled them. Darius glanced at her, that deep smile tugging at his lips. "You don't look like the woman they put on magazine covers right now. And I think I like this one better." Something inside her cracked open at his words. She leaned her head back, staring at the passing streetlights. "Do you ever think about about not driving?" His grip tightened on the wheel. "Every day, but interviews don't get past the screening stage. Wrong school, wrong background, wrong fit. But not wrong talent," she said firmly, remembering the confidence in his tone, the sharpness in his gaze. He glanced at her then, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. "You believe that?" "I do." The car slowed at a stoplight, red bathing them in glow. She turned, their faces close, breaths mingling. Her hand found his jaw rough with stubble, and before she could stop herself, she kissed him again. This time, he kissed back without hesitation. It was deeper, hungrier, weeks of loneliness colliding in a stolen moment. Her curves pressed against him as she leaned across the console, his hand sliding instinctively to her waist, anchoring her. The honk of a horn behind them broke it. Darius pulled forward, breath ragged, knuckles white on the wheel. "Vivienne," he murmured, warning and plea all at once. "I know," she whispered. "This is reckless, impossible, but I can't stop." He swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the road. "Neither can I." When he dropped her at the Belle-Meade gate, she lingered. "Will I see you again?" she asked, voice soft but certain. He hesitated, then nodded. "You will. But Vivienne," his eyes burned into hers, "this thing, we can't play with it. It'll cost us." She leaned closer through the open window, her perfume wrapped around him. "Then let it cost," she whispered, "because I already know. I fell the second I saw you." Her heels clicked against the driveway as she walked inside, heart pounding. Behind her, his taillights faded into the night, carrying away the only man who had ever made her feel seen. And for the first time in years, Vivienne Clarke didn't care about consequences. She cared about him.
The following morning, Vivienne sat at her kitchen island with a cappuccino cooling in front of her, but she barely touched it. She had been up since dawn, staring at her reflection in the vast mirrors of her walk-in, rehearsing lies she would have to tell Mason. A Vogue interview loomed later that day, Goldman tomorrow. But the truth was, she couldn't stop thinking about Darius. His steady voice in the car, the way he had kissed her like he wasn't afraid of her empire, her curves, her world. Her phone buzzed. Mason again. "Babe, dinner at the club tonight. Dad wants us both there. It's important. Wear something elegant." Vivienne sighed, pushing the message aside. Her mind whispered what her heart already knew. Mason was a merger, not a man. He wanted her patents, her publicity, her pedigree. Darius had nothing to offer but himself, and that was everything she craved. The day blurred through meetings and rehearsals, but by evening she found herself staring at her reflection in a scarlet dress again. Mason would want her glowing, smiling, untouchable. Instead, she saw the fatigue beneath her eyes, the restlessness in her chest. When she arrived at the club, chandeliers glittered over a sea of pearl necklaces and bespoke suits. Mason's hand gripped her hip, his kiss perfunctory, his whisper rehearsed. "Smile wider, babe. Photographers are here." She smiled, but her heart wasn't in it. At dinner, Mason's father droned about mergers, investors, legacy. The words slid over Vivienne like oil, her attention fraying with each toast. Her phone buzzed, in her clutch. "Darius, how are you holding up?" Her pulse jumped. Just his name on the screen sent heat through her. She typed back quickly under the table. "Trapped. Fancy dinner. Everyone talking legacy. No one talking life." 3 dots pulsed. Then, "Step outside. Sometimes air fixes everything." Vivienne excused herself, heels sinking into the thick carpet until she reached the patio. Nashville's summer air was heavy, but it was freer than the suffocating ballroom. She typed fast. "Wish you were here." The reply came almost instantly. "I'm 10 minutes away." Her breath caught. She should have said no. She should have deleted the message. Instead, she walked back inside, whispered to Mason that she needed a headache break, and slipped away before the cameras noticed. Outside, Darius's sedan rolled to a stop by the service entrance. He leaned against the car, arms folded, shirt hugging his frame in a way that made Vivienne's mouth dry. "You're insane," she whispered as she approached, her heels clicking like a metronome of defiance. "You texted me?" he said simply, opening the passenger door. And just like that, she was in. They drove in silence at first, the city a blur of neon. Finally, she exhaled. "I shouldn't be doing this." "Neither should I," he admitted. His hand tightened on the wheel. "But here we are." They ended up at the riverfront, parking near the pedestrian bridge where the Cumberland shimmered beneath city lights. Vivienne slipped off her heels and walked barefoot along the cool grass, the scarlet silk of her dress catching moonlight. Darius followed, close enough to feel, far enough to respect. "Out here," he said quietly, "you don't look like the CEO on magazine covers. You just look human." She turned, hair tumbling loose from its pins, lips parted. "And what do I look like to you?" He hesitated, eyes lingering on her curves, her flushed cheeks, her bare feet sinking into earth. "Like someone worth falling for."
The words broke something open in her. She stepped forward, closing the space, and kissed him. Harder than before, needier. His hands found her waist, pulling her against him, her body pressed to his with a hunger that felt both forbidden and inevitable. For a moment, the world disappeared. There was no Mason, no board, no Vogue, just lips and breath and the sharp ache of wanting. When they finally broke apart, Vivienne rested her forehead against his chest. "This is going to ruin me," she whispered. "Or save you," he countered, his voice steady. But the city didn't let secrets live long. By Monday morning, Mason confronted her in her office, his jaw tight, his tone clipped. "You left the dinner? Photographers asked questions. Dad had to cover for you. What the hell is going on?" Vivienne crossed her arms, holding her ground. "I needed air. I don't live my life for staged photographs." "Don't be naive," Mason snapped. "Your life is my life. Our families are tied now. You don't just get to run off." His words struck her like a chain snapping shut. For years, she had prided herself on control. Yet here was Mason, reminding her she was just another pawn in his family's empire. She straightened, curves taut with defiance. "Maybe I don't want our families tied. Maybe I want a life that's mine." Mason narrowed his eyes. "Is there someone else?" Her silence was answer enough. "Unbelievable. An Uber driver? Do you have any idea how this looks?" Her heart slammed in her chest. He knew, or suspected enough to say it. "You think you can play CEO and Cinderella at the same time? Investors won't care about your little rebellion. They'll care that you're reckless." He stormed out, leaving her shaking. For the first time in her adult life, Vivienne Clarke wasn't sure if she would survive the collision of her two worlds. But she was sure of one thing. She wanted him. Consequences be damned. And the consequences were already coming.
Vivienne Clarke had always believed she could control the narrative. She had spun her company out of a rented apartment into a tech darling, turned her curves into power instead of liability, and polished her life into something glossy enough for Vogue covers. But the morning after Mason stormed from her office, she woke with a raw certainty. The story was no longer hers alone. The fallout began fast. By 9, her assistant Cam rushed in, eyes wide. Goldman's partner Sarah Chen wants reassurance on leadership stability. Mason's family is whispering that you're distracted, and the Tennessee Ledger ran a blind item this morning about a CEO seen kissing a driver on the riverfront. Vivienne's blood went cold. They don't have names. No, but they're circling. She stood at her office window, Nashville sprawling below, like a kingdom she no longer ruled. Mason had likely fed the rumor himself, testing how quickly it could burn. For the first time, Vivienne felt the walls of her empire closing in. That evening, she met Darius in East Nashville at the community cafe where he often worked. The air was thick with espresso and the chatter of coders bent over glowing laptops. He looked up as she entered, and the lines of worry on his face softened at the sight of her. "You heard?" she asked, sliding into the seat across from him. "I did." He tapped the newspaper folded beside his laptop. "They don't say your name, but it won't take long." Her chest tightened. "I can't lose this company, Darius. Everything I've built, everything my team depends on." "You won't," he said quietly. "Not if you stop letting them tell your story." She studied him. There was no calculation in his tone, no angle. Just truth. "You don't understand. These people, Mason, Goldman, the board, they see me as valuable because I play by their rules. If they think I'm reckless, then show them you're not," he interrupted gently. "Show them you're brave." The word struck her like a chord. Brave. She had been called brilliant, ruthless, visionary, but never brave.
2 days later, Vivienne walked into her board meeting knowing she was about to set fire to her own house. The conference room buzzed with tension. Sterling Clarke, her father, sat at the head of the table, his jaw tight. Goldman Partners whispered with Mason's family. Her TCO, Marcus, glanced at her with something close to betrayal. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vivienne began, sliding her purse on the table, "I'm here to present a new direction for Clarke Technologies, and I won't waste words. Our hiring practices, our culture, and our vision need radical change." Murmurs rippled. Sterling's eyes narrowed. Mason smirked from the far corner, already rehearsing his coup. She clicked her first slide. A portfolio of apps, platforms, and code samples, every one built by candidates her company had filtered out. At the center was Darius's special needs coordination app, glowing on the screen with its elegant design. "These developers never made it past our HR filters," Vivienne said. "Non-traditional careers, wrong keywords, but their work is better than half the products we fund." "This is corporate suicide," Marcus muttered. "No, this is survival. Homogeneity is killing innovation, and if you can't see that, you're already obsolete." Mason leaned forward, voice dripping with disdain. "This isn't about innovation. This is about your affair with a driver. You're gambling investor trust on a fling." Her cheeks burned, but she didn't flinch. "Yes, I met someone outside our networks, someone you'd dismiss as unqualified. He built software this board should have invested in years ago. If that scares you more than your own complacency, maybe you don't belong here." The room exploded in protests. Sterling slammed a hand on the table. "Enough. Vivienne, you have dragged this company through your personal distractions. You will step back from operations until the board reviews your judgment." Vivienne inhaled slowly, steadying the quake inside. She looked her father in the eye. "No, I won't step back. I won't apologize for seeing talent where you refuse to look. Fire me if you want, but I will not build my future on exclusion and lies." Silence fell. Goldman's Sarah Chen broke it. "Show us the numbers, Ms. Clarke. If your claim is real, prove it." Vivienne advanced to her final slide. Metrics from pilot projects she had run quietly with coders Darius introduced. Faster timelines, higher client satisfaction, lower attrition. Hard proof. The room shifted. Even Sterling couldn't mask his surprise. Sarah leaned back, thoughtful. "We'll consider your proposal. But know this, if you're wrong, you lose everything." Vivienne nodded. "Then I'll risk everything, because the cost of staying blind is higher." That night, she found Darius waiting outside her estate, leaning against his sedan, arms folded. His presence steadied her like gravity. "How bad?" he asked. "Bad," she admitted, heels dangling from her hand. "They threatened to strip me of power. Mason tried to humiliate me. My father's furious. And you? I've never felt clearer." He stepped closer, his warmth wrapping around her. "You just put me on the screen in front of Wall Street. Because you deserved it," she said fiercely. "You don't know what that means for me," he whispered, shaking his head. "A man like me in that room, they'll tear us both apart." She touched his face, her curves pressing into him, her eyes searching his. "Then let them, because I'd rather burn with you than shine without you." The kiss that followed was fire. No hesitation, no fear, just hunger. Her fingers curled into his shirt, his hands anchoring her waist, pulling her flush against him. It was reckless, desperate, unstoppable. When they finally broke apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "If this ends us, it won't," she cut in. "Not if we fight, together." But Mason wasn't done. The next morning, headlines blared across Nashville business feeds. Clarke CEO compromised, investor confidence shaken amid scandal. Photos of Vivienne in her scarlet gown, eyes fixed on Darius's sedan outside the club, splashed across the screen. Cam rushed into her office. "It's everywhere. They know his name. They know he's a driver. Vivienne felt the floor drop. Mason had weaponized the truth. Her phone buzzed, a message from Darius. "Don't come to me tonight. Cameras outside my place. They're hunting." For the first time, Vivienne Clarke was afraid, not of losing her company, but of losing him. She closed her laptop, squared her shoulders, and whispered to her reflection, "Brave, because the firestorm was here, and there was no turning back." The scandal burned through Nashville like wildfire. By Monday morning, Vivienne Clarke's face was plastered across every tech blog and business journal in the South. "Clarke CEO gambles company on reckless romance," one headline sneered. "From boardroom to backseat, Techstar's downfall," another jeered. Investors pulled their money from the air as if it were already on fire. Clarke Technologies' valuations slipped by the hour. Mason's family whispered in boardrooms, offering solutions that involved replacing Vivienne with a more controllable executive. For the first time in years, she stood on the edge of losing everything. But strangely, she had never felt freer. On Tuesday morning, she drove not to her Belmead office, but to the Edge Hill Community Center, where Darius had been mentoring a circle of coders. The space buzzed with energy, laptops open on mismatched tables, whiteboards crammed with lines of code and sketches of apps. When she walked in, the room fell silent, eyes widening. Vivienne Clarke, curvy, radiant, and infamous, stood among them not as a CEO, but as a woman whose life had been cracked open. Darius rose from his seat, his eyes searching her face, cautious, protective. "You shouldn't be here. Reporters are sniffing around. They'll twist this into another headline." "Let them," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. "I'm done hiding." A murmur spread through the room. Some of the younger developers whispered excitedly, others looked at her with suspicion. "I came here," Vivienne continued, "because I want everyone to know the truth. I didn't fall because I kissed a driver. I fell because I finally saw what real talent looks like, and I'd been blind." She looked at Darius, her voice softening. "And I fell because of you." The room held its breath. Darius exhaled slowly, then shook his head with a rueful smile. "Vivienne, you're about to go down in flames." "Then I'll burn," she whispered, "but not without you beside me." The next day, Vivienne faced the board again. Cameras had gathered outside the tower, journalists shouting questions about her affair, about her reckless judgment. She walked past them, spine straight, curves swaying with deliberate defiance. Inside the boardroom, her father's expression was granite. Mason sat smugly at his side, certain she was finished. Goldman partners leaned back, waiting for blood. Vivienne placed her purse on the table and met every eye. "I won't be resigning, and I won't apologize." Mason snorted. "You've humiliated this company. Investors are fleeing. You kissed away our credibility." Vivienne turned to the screen, clicking through slides not of polished forecasts, but of projects built by overlooked coders. Darius's app for special needs families, Maria's education platform, Jasmine's healthcare navigation tool. These are the people we've been ignoring. People building solutions to real problems while we've been busy protecting our pedigree. They don't have Vanderbilt on their resumes. They don't sip champagne at the club. But they're the future. And if we don't change, we won't have one. Sterling's voice was ice. "Vivienne, you are destroying the family name." She looked at him, unflinching. "No, Dad. I'm redefining it." The silence was electric. Finally, Sarah Chen from Goldman leaned forward. "Miss Clarke, what you're proposing is risky, but the results of your pilot programs are undeniable. Productivity up, retention up, client satisfaction up." She folded her hands. "If you can scale this, Goldman is still in. But understand, your personal life will stay under the microscope. One misstep, and you'll lose everything." Vivienne nodded. "Then watch closely, because I'm done pretending." That night, she went to Darius's modest apartment in East Nashville. Reporters had camped outside, flashes firing as she walked past, but she didn't care. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and code. Her mother greeted her warmly from the couch, her voice soft but strong. "You must be the woman who turned my son's world upside down." Vivienne flushed, smiling, and he turned mine. When they were alone, Darius stood behind her, shoulders taut. "Vivienne, you've put everything at risk. For me. I don't know if I can live with that." She stepped closer, her curves brushing against him as she slid her hands along his arms. "I didn't risk it for you. I risked it for me, for the woman I want to be, and yes, for the man I want beside me." He turned, his face caught between fear and longing. "You don't know what this will cost." "I do," she said softly, "but I also know what it's worth." Then she kissed him. Not impulsive this time, not stolen, but deliberate, slow, certain. A kiss that said, "I choose this. I choose you." Weeks passed. The firestorm raged, but something remarkable happened. Instead of collapsing, Clarke Technologies adapted. The new skills-based hiring initiative filled the halls with fresh voices and diverse perspectives. Clients raved about the innovation. Investors who once doubted her leaned in, curious. And Vivienne, once the darling of glossy magazines, became something else entirely. A symbol of risk, of courage, of change. She moved from Belmead to East Nashville, choosing an apartment above the makerspace where community coders gathered. On weekends, she and Darius taught workshops together. Her in wrap dresses rolled up to her elbows, him with sleeves pushed past his forearms, both laughing as teenagers debugged their first apps. Her father came once, stiff in his tailored suit. He stood at the back of the room, watching his daughter glow among people he would have dismissed. When class ended, he approached her, his voice rough. "I didn't understand at first, but I see it now. I'm proud of you, Vivienne." She hugged him, tears pricking her eyes. "Thank you, Dad." A year later, Vivienne stood on stage at the Nashville Tech Innovation Summit, no longer in jewel-toned gowns, but in a simple black dress. The applause shook the hall as she began. "Last year, I almost lost everything. My company, my reputation, my future. All because I kissed someone the world told me I shouldn't." The room leaned in, breathless. But that kiss was the beginning of truth. Because real innovation doesn't come from exclusivity. It comes from inclusion, from opening doors instead of guarding gates, from believing talent exists in places we've been too blind to look. She clicked to a slide. Her new team. Faces of every background, stories of resilience, apps that changed lives. "And yes," she said, voice softening as her eyes found Darius in the front row, "sometimes innovation comes from love, the kind that demands you be braver than you've ever been." The hall erupted in applause. That night, after the celebration, Vivienne and Darius walked along the river where it had all begun. The city shimmered across the Cumberland, alive with possibility. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked. "The old life, the certainty, the comfort?" She smiled, leaning into him, his arms strong around her. "I miss nothing, because I have everything I never knew I needed." He kissed her then, slow and deep, the city fading behind them. Vivienne Clarke, once untouchable, now unshakably human, had chosen love over fear, truth over pretense, inclusion over comfort. And as she kissed the man who had found her purse and unlocked her heart, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She hadn't fallen at first sight. She had risen.